June 2003. A room in Billund, Denmark. A 35-year-old economist named Jørgen Vig Knudstorp stood up in front of the family that owned one of the world's most famous toy companies and delivered a verdict. "We are on a burning platform," he said, "losing money with negative cash flow and a real risk of debt default which could lead to a breakup." Not consultant language. Those were the words of someone who had spent 2 years reading the actual numbers, and who had found something the family had not wanted to see. The numbers justified the language. In 2003, LEGO posted a pre-tax loss of 1.4 billion kokkes, roughly 160 million pounds at the time. Sales had fallen 26% in a single year. Secondary sources put total outstanding debt at approximately $800 million. The company was months from insolvency. This company, which had given the world the interlocking plastic brick, which had defined how an entire generation learned to imagine and build, was months from the wall. Nobody had obviously done anything wrong, or more precisely, everybody had tried to do everything right, and that was exactly the problem. To understand how LEGO got here, you have to start in 1932. In the Danish town of Billund, a carpenter named Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen built a small wooden toy workshop. He called the company LEGO, from the Danish leg goat, play well. By 1947, LEGO had acquired its first plastic injection molding machine. On 28 January 1958, Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen patented the object that would become the defining artifact of modern childhood, the interlocking stud and tube brick. He died 6 weeks later, but what he created outlasted him by decades. The brick is not just a toy, it is a system. Every LEGO piece ever manufactured must connect to every other LEGO piece ever manufactured. A brick made in 1958 fits inside a set made in 2024. That universal compatibility, every element works with every other element, is the single thing that separates LEGO from every other toy company on Earth. But universal compatibility carries a constraint. Every new, unique element that LEGO introduces must be precision-tooled, manufactured, and stored indefinitely, because any piece might be needed again, for any future set. Each new shape is not a one-time creative decision. It is a permanent cost commitment. In the right hands, that constraint is a discipline. In the wrong hands, it becomes a very expensive habit. Imagine you are running LEGO's manufacturing operation in Billund in 2003. The product team sends a request. They need a new, organically shaped rock element for a fantasy adventure set. Nothing like it exists in the catalog. You approve it. That looks like creativity. Here is what it actually is. LEGO commissions a steel injection mold for that piece. The mold costs somewhere between 50,000 euros and 150,000 euros to design, engineer, and build. It produces copies of that one unique element for the run of that one set. When the set is retired, typically after 18 months, the mold goes into storage. At the peak of LEGO's complexity, there were roughly 13,000 unique elements in the catalog. Research from MIT Sloan's David Robertson found that approximately 90% of those elements were used in only a single set, not a product family, one set. That is 90% of 13,000 pieces, each requiring its own expensive mold, each generating revenue from exactly one product run. The cost was invisible because it was spread across thousands of product lines. No single line looked catastrophic. Aggregated, LEGO was paying an enormous manufacturing tax that nobody had named. The brick is a system, and systems demand coherence. LEGO had quietly stopped enforcing that coherence. The bill had been arriving silently for years. At the same time, LEGO was expanding in a completely different direction. The late 1990s were an era of brand extension. Disney had cruise ships. Ralph Lauren had paint. By 2003, LEGO had theme parks, a clothing line, a video game studio, a digital camera product called LEGO Studios, and an early learning range. Each of these businesses carried its own overheads, its own competitors, its own seasonal rhythms. Theme parks have attendance risk. Clothing has inventory seasons. Digital cameras have component supply chains and electronics margins. Not one of them produced a single precision-molded ABS brick. Not one of them leveraged the thing LEGO actually knew how to do. The common explanation is that LEGO simply forgot what it was, got distracted by brand ambition. That is the soft version. The harder version is structural. Every non-brick business LEGO entered added overhead that the core brick business had to cross-subsidize. LEGO was now competing in 5 markets it did not fully understand, using revenue from the one market it dominated. In January 2004, Paul Plogman, the executive vice president who had overseen much of the expansion, was fired. Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen, grandson of the founder and CEO for 25 years, released a statement that said, "Our aim for 2004 is to break even. This will be difficult, but it is realistic." That is a man managing expectations to the floor. LEGO had not forgotten what it was. It had built a machine that spent money undermining the one thing that made it irreplaceable. In October 2004, Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen stepped down as CEO. On the same day, he injected $800 million of his personal funds, roughly £90 million, into the company's finances. The founder's grandson writing a personal check to keep the family business alive. That bought time. What Knudstorp did with the time was the interesting part. Jorgen Vig Knudstorp was appointed CEO that same day, aged 35, an economist with a PhD from Aarhus University and a few years at McKinsey. He was the first person outside the Christensen family to run LEGO in its 72-year history. First priority, sell the things that were not bricks. In July 2005, LEGO sold the Legoland parks to the British leisure group Merlin Entertainments for €375 million, roughly £250 million. LEGO retained a 30% stake in Merlin, so the family did not exit theme parks entirely. But the operating liability, the day-to-day cost machine, was gone. Second priority, the catalog. Knudstorp set about halving the number of unique elements, from roughly 13,000 pieces down to approximately 7,000. Every product was assessed with a single question. Does this set genuinely need a new piece, or can it be built with what already exists? Most of the time, it could. That just required accepting the constraint. Simplicity was not a creative retreat. It was an engineering decision. And in LEGO's case, a simpler catalog was cheaper by an order of magnitude. There is a move in LEGO's recovery that is usually described as going back to basics, retreating from ambitious tie-ins to concentrate on the pure brick. The truth is the opposite. Licensed IP was not abandoned. It became the centerpiece of the strategy. And the reason it worked is one of the stranger economic relationships in consumer goods. Here is how toy licensing normally works. A toy company pays an IP holder, a film studio say, a royalty of roughly 5 to 15% of wholesale revenues. That royalty is a direct cost against every unit sold. Standard economic logic says, avoid licensing if you can. It is a tax on your own product. LEGO's experience, starting with the Star Wars license signed in 1998, the first licensed IP in LEGO's history, pointed somewhere different. When Lucasfilm agreed to let LEGO render the Millennium Falcon in brick form, parents walked into toy shops and made a decision they would not have made for an equivalent original set. Pre-validated demand. George Lucas was doing the marketing. LEGO just had to ship the pieces. But here is the part most accounts miss. Licensed sets also disciplined the piece catalog. A Millennium Falcon does not need a new organic rock element. It needs gray plates and curved slopes, shapes already in the system. Licensing, handled correctly, was a force for SKU simplicity, not complexity. LEGO paid the royalty, got the demand signal, and avoided inventing an entirely new play system to justify the price point. IP holders came to LEGO not just because LEGO paid. They came because a LEGO set in a child's bedroom keeps a franchise alive between films. Warner Brothers understood the same logic when Harry Potter launched in 2001. The royalty flowed one way. The brand benefit ran both ways. The 2004 accounts looked terrible on their face. A net loss of $1.9 billion, driven largely by $1.25 billion in asset impairments and $500 million in restructuring charges. On paper, the worst year in LEGO's history. But the number that mattered was buried inside it. The toy business itself, stripped of the write-downs, posted an operating profit of $103 million. The machine was turning. 2005 was the first genuine recovery year. Net profit, $702 million. The Legoland sale had closed. The catalog was leaner. Licensed sets were selling. The following year, 2006, net profit more than doubled, $1.4 billion, on revenue of $7.8 billion. By the time Knudstorp stepped down as CEO in December 2016, 12 years after the burning platform speech, LEGO had become the largest toy company in the world by revenue, not by segment, total. It had passed Hasbro. It had passed Mattel. It had passed every other toy company on Earth. In 2024, LEGO reported record results: $74.3 billion in revenue, approximately $10.8 billion US dollars, and $13.8 billion in net profit, roughly $2 billion. For context, Hasbro's total 2024 revenue was approximately $4.1 billion. Mattel's was roughly $5.4 billion. LEGO's net profit alone exceeded Hasbro's entire company sales. From the brink of insolvency to $10.8 billion in 20 years. The distance between those 2 points is what a spreadsheet can cover, when it is asking the right questions. There is a version of this story that goes, LEGO lost its way and found it again. That version has the shape of a redemption arc. It is also incomplete. What Knudstorp actually found, in 2 years of reading LEGO's numbers, was not that the company had made bad decisions. He found that LEGO had built a system with a structural flaw, one that rewarded creative expansion while hiding the cost. Every new element shape looked like an innovation. Aggregated, it was a silent tax. Every non-brick business looked like growth. Aggregated, it was a distraction from the only thing that was genuinely hard to replace. The interlocking brick is still the same geometry Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen patented on 28 January 1958. No competitor has made it obsolete. No digital platform has replaced it. A system that connects to everything turns out to be very difficult to kill. Knudstorp's task was not to save LEGO. It was to make the company worthy of the asset it already had. There is a question worth carrying. How many organizations are in LEGO's 2003 position right now, not failing visibly, not making obviously bad decisions, just quietly paying a complexity tax that nobody has named? The spreadsheet does not surface that automatically. Someone has to decide to read it properly. Kjeld Kirk Kristiansen named his company after the Danish for play well. By 2003, LEGO had forgotten the second word. What Knudstorp gave back was not the play, it was the well.